Question 1. How are educational and school psychology similar and how are they different? I will begin answering this question by stating the characteristics of each field of study, which are school psychology and educational psychology, and then noting the differences. School psychologists problem solve using data-driven approaches and empirically supported methods to help students with their social, emotional, educational, and behavioral needs. Their work is primarily conducted in the schools. Educational psychologists look at school systems and evaluate or study how students learn and the most effective ways to teach students. Their work can be in diverse settings like schools, community centers, research centers, and learning centers. With these basic explanations of what professionals in each field do, two obvious differences are highlighted. One, educational psychologists take a more global approach to problem solving and bringing about change in educational systems, and school psychologists work one-on-one in the schools with students and teachers and students. These two differences correlate to the methods that are utilized by each field. School psychology includes clinical, developmental, cognitive, and educational foundations. Also, they tend to use a single subject design in their research. Similarly, educational psychology or psychologists also study child development and cognition. However, it's done less from a clinical perspective and focuses more on motivation and measurement. This divergence between the two fields stems from the history of the emergence of both fields. The research states that both fields emerged during the Progressive Movement, a period between 1890 and 1920, also known as the Golden Era. This progressive movement or paradigm shift is characterized by a change in the way adults view children. Prior to this period, children were seen as supplemental help for the family in terms of economic gains or economic assets. This view changed and adults began to see children as family assets. With this paradigm shift came a new regard for education and special education and the incorporation of experimental psychology and an interest in professional developments in education. Agencies like public schools, juvenile courts, community services, and educational clinics were created to assist in the social welfare of society, with their practitioners being influenced by G. Stanley Hall, which was the founder of the APA, among others. Laws were passed that required regular school attendance. This stimulated an influx of many new students in the public schools, with abilities and backgrounds that could vary tremendously. Also, the time spent in schools was characterized by a dramatic increase from 64% to 83%, 135 days to 173 days. Enrollment doubled from 12.7 million students to 25.7 million students. All these dramatic changes influenced the need for school psychologists and educational psychology as a field of study and practice. In both fields of study, G. Stanley Hall was particularly instrumental because he began the child study movement. Through his observational and questionnaire methods of research, Hall used the insight he gained to educate adults about the importance of childhood. He focused on the normative aspects of development and through his research defined what a typical child would look like. Leitner Whitmer, considered the father of clinical psychology, contributed more to the emergence of school psychology because his research focused on the individual child, specifically children experiencing problems related to education and social well-being. The key difference that can be highlighted here is that Hall took a nomothetic approach to studying children or education, which focused on what people share with others or the commonalities that people hold, and was characterized by experiments, correlations, and psychometric methods. Whitmer's approach was more geographic in nature and focused on what makes students or children unique. It was characterized by case studies, informal interviews, unstructured observations, and other qualitative research methods. In essence, Hall's nomothetic approach is more characteristic of what educational psychology is, and Whitmer's approach is more aligned with that of school psychology today. Another important founder of the school psychology and educational psychology movements was E.L. Thorndike. He was also important because of in the emergence of both fields, because he contributed the law of effect, which developed operant conditioning, which is a cornerstone of behaviorism. And also, importantly, he was the writer of the first educational psychology text in 1903 and is responsible for founding the Journal of Educational Psychology. Alfred Binet's development of the first intelligence scale and then H. Goddard's introduction of this scale or test in the US in the early 1900s contributed significantly to both fields. This assessment and its subsequent modifications were used by Arnold Jessel and others. Arnold Jessel was the first person with the title school psychologist. Assessment continues to be a huge component in both fields. A little side note, today 50%, some might say more, of the school psychologist's time is spent on assessment. To summarize, educational psychology and school psychology share many founding fathers and many others that I didn't mention today. The two fields emerged during the same time but diverge in their focus and methods. School psychology, in my opinion, takes a more narrow view of understanding problems that students face in the schools and that students face in the schools. For instance, creating individualized interventions for one particular student in one particular classroom. Educational psychologists attempt to tackle problems that school systems and learners face as a whole. So I think, in my opinion, they tackle more of the systemic issues that are prevalent in education. They take a broader view. And this concludes my response to question 1. How are educational and school psychology similar, and how are they different? Thank you.